Welcome to the Pacific Northwest Collegiate Leadership Conference. As you know, schedules are online. If you need it on paper too, we have them. And all these people in these red leadership shirts are going to be helping out throughout the day. So if you have any questions, accommodations, let them know and they'll let me know. So as we're starting off, we're going to get started with the keynote. And so I'm here to introduce Rudy Francisco.
Pullman, Washington, how are we doing? Yeah! I said Pullman, Washington, how are we doing? Yeah! So my name is Rudy Francisco. I'm a poet from San Diego, California. Almost forgot where I was from. I'm a poet from San Diego, California. Do we have anybody from San Diego in the building today? Oh, okay. Okay, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to do a few poems. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the experiences that I've had with leadership and how that has helped me become the writer that I am today. I want to do like a little warm-up poem real quick. Can I warm up? Is that fine? Can I do that? All right, so this is called A Few Things I Strongly Believe. If you believe in these things, you can snap your fingers, you can nod your head. If you don't believe in these things, you can not do anything. So here we go. A few things I strongly believe. I believe that sour apple flavored anything is delicious. I believe that orange juice tastes better with pulp. You don't like pulp? No? I believe Cinnabon is made by angels. I like Arizona iced tea, but 24 ounces of anything for $1 might actually be poison. For real. I believe that masculinity is a wet fish that most men are just trying to hold on to. And smiling before a fight is the quickest way to make your opponent nervous. I believe that music is easier to digest than medicine. I believe a good song can turn any room into a church. I believe that Whitney Houston's voice is all the proof I need to know angels exist. That's the end of that poem. You could clap. So a little bit about me, right? People always ask like how I got started in all of this, right? And I'll start from the beginning. So I was a senior in high school, and in our senior English class, we were starting our poetry segment, right? And we were given the assignment to write a poem, bring it back, you get full credit, right? So I wrote this poem about this girl named Rochelle Moss that I had a huge crush on. I thought she was absolutely amazing, right? So I wrote her this poem, and I brought it back the next day. Me and my friend Samantha, we get to the class before everybody else does, and we're sitting down. She's like, hey, let me read your poem, right? So I was like, okay, cool. I give it to her. She reads it. She tells me that it's good, right? The rest of the class files in, and we go through the entire lesson, and then right before the class ends, the teacher asks if anybody wants to read their poems out loud before we turn them in. Right? So, of course, Samantha, she nudges me. She's like, hey, you should read your poem. And I was like, no. She said, no, you should read your poem. I said, no. We went back and forth for a minute. And then she's like, well, what if I read it for you? Right? And I said, okay, you can read it. So she gets up, and she's like, hey, class, this is Rudy's poem. And I was like, that is not what we discussed. You had one job, right? So she reads the poem, and the class actually claps, right? And I had a class that hated everything. So the fact that they clapped for this was actually a big deal for me, right? And then afterwards, my teacher, she pulls me aside, and she tells me that she thinks that I'm a good writer, and nobody had ever told me that before, right? I think some of the things that we forget is, I think one of the main things that we forget is how important our words are, right? Like the fact that I had no ambition to be a writer. I had no ambition to even write another poem. But the fact that somebody else told me that it was good, right, made me want to continue doing it. And I think that's one of the principles that we have to remember about our leadership, is that our words matter and how we communicate with the people around us matter, right? The fact that she told me that it was good made me want to write more, right? Made me want to be even better at it, right? So I went off to college. right? And I became a resident advisor. Do we have any RAs in the building? Okay, we got like 2. That's what's up. Maybe a little more back there. So I became a resident advisor, right? And I went to my resident director because, as an RA, you have to put on programs, right? And I had no idea what kind of programs to put on. So I went to my resident director, and I expressed this to him, and he was like, well, what do you enjoy doing, right? And I said, well, I really enjoy writing. And he's like, well, why don't you host an open mic for the students? Right? So I was like, okay, cool, I could do that, right? So I hosted this open mic, and a whole bunch of our students came because we had a very small campus population. We had probably maybe 1,000 people on our campus, and we had like 300 people there, which was crazy, right? And a few of my friends from high school, they came as well, and they actually read a few poems, and I didn't know that they wrote. So we had a huge conversation about it afterwards, and they were like, hey, there's this open mic in North Park, which is our art district. And they said, let's go. And I was like, okay, cool, like I'll go, but I don't want to perform, right? And they were like, yeah, it's fine, don't you worry about it. Fast forward, we're at the open mic, and how open mic works is, the host gets up, introduces the next person, that person does a poem, that person sits down, host gets up, introduces the next person, right? So in the middle of the show, host gets up, and he's like, all right, so next on stage, we have Rudy Francisco. And I was like, that's crazy. There's another Rudy Francisco. Like, what are the odds, And they were like, oh, so we signed you up. And I was like, so this friendship is over. And they said, but you still got to do a poem. We're all waiting. So I get up, right? And I only had one poem at the time. And it was a poem that I wrote one day because how many people have ever seen HBO Deaf Poetry? Like 2 people? Awesome. So HBO Deaf Poetry was a series in the early 2000s. And it was the first time you saw spoken word poetry on TV, right? And I was in my dorm one day, and I randomly stumbled across an episode of it, and I had no idea what it was initially. And at the end, it was like, the host says, thank you for coming out to HBO Deaf Poetry. And I was like, oh, wow, they were doing poems. And I had never seen poetry like that before. So I was like, I want to write something, right? So I went home, and I was writing, and this is what I came up with. This is also my first spoken word piece, the poem that I did when my friends signed me up without my permission. And here we go. I want to write a poem, but I wanted to say what you're thinking. I want to patch up the holes when your boat starts sinking. I want to write that one-of-a-kind poem, that free your mind poem, that I like how you made that rhyme poem, that I like that last line poem, that can I hear that one more time, that is, if you don't mind, poem. I want to write that she's kind of fine poem, that I wish she was mine poem, that I want to ask her out, but I'm on my last dime poem, that what should I do, please give me a sign poem. I want to write that so heartfelt, I think I know him poem, that this is so amazing, I got to go find all my friends so I can show them poem. I want to write about everything that I've ever wanted to be. I want to write a poem so beautiful that my parents might actually start to agree. I want to write about you, about me, about us, about everything from cars and trains to riding the bus to betrayal and trust and mistakes and heartaches. I want to talk about when I first learned to drive and I was so scared to let my foot off of the brakes. I want to talk about battles, about wars, about victories and losses, about ethnic cleansing, genocide, and lawns penetrated by burning crosses and burnt down churches. I want to write 2 poems for everyone who's ever been told they were worthless. I want my metaphors and similes to part oceans, rivers, and seas. I want to write love poems so sweet the ink on the paper attracts honeybees. I want to speak the unspoken. I want to fix everything in our world that's broken. I want to be the one that performs the Heimlich maneuver as soon as our society starts choking. I want my words of inspiration to inspire somebody else to be inspirational. I want the motivation in my voice to motivate somebody else to be motivational. I want my phrases to be published, documented, and quoted. I want people to recite my work 10 years from now and have critics say, that was cool, but it wasn't nearly as good as he first wrote it. You see, I want husbands to thank my poems for the heart that they stole. And I know that this is just some shameless attempt to immortalize my soul. But honestly, I don't want to be forgotten. You see, I don't need fortune. I really don't need fame. I just want people to know what I stood for and why I came. I refuse to die a mere occupant of the earth, a John Doe, another faceless man out there with no name. I refuse to be just another man. I want to walk for centuries and leave my footprints in the sand for the world to see. And I want to be cremated into ashes of rhymes and poetry. I'm just feeling like one day they're going to love me. I don't share my emotions too often. But poetry will allow me to die with my heart on my sleeve. They never saw me coming, but I'll make sure they grieve when I leave. Thank you. So, thank you. So that was like my first spoken word performance poem, and after that, right, like I fell in love with being on stage, right, and I looked for more opportunities to do it, right, and what's really crazy is that, like, later on, of course, and I'll go into further detail, that it later on became my profession, and I often think about how different my life would be if it wasn't for my friends who signed me up without my permission, right? Because I think sometimes we tell ourselves things that are counterproductive. For a long time, I was telling myself, okay, I'll get on stage and I'll perform when I'm ready, right? And what does that even mean? And I think sometimes we use things like that to talk ourselves out of challenging ourselves, right? And I think it was so amazing that my friends were just like, you know what? He's gonna do it. So sign him up, you know? And for a long time, like that was the only poem that I had. I would just do that poem all the time. And my friends, they were like, you should probably write another poem. And I dived deeper into the art form. And what's really interesting is that, so before I was doing this full time, I used to do statistical analysis, right? Which is not like poetry. And I was full-time in a PhD program in industrial and organizational psychology, which is also not like poetry either. And I fell in love with writing and performance along the way. And it got to the point to where I couldn't be traveling 2 weeks out of the month and still work full-time and still be a full-time student. So I decided to take a break from my program, and I decided to leave my job and do poetry full-time. So when I told this to my mother, so a little bit about my family, right? So my mother and my father, they're both from Belize, which is in Central America. And my father and my mother specifically is from Barranco, right, which is a really small village, right? And in Barranco, either you're a fisherman or you're a fisherman. There aren't a lot of options, is what I'm saying. So the idea of doing art full time, like that wasn't even something that my mother imagined as a possibility. Like my mother grew up without electricity, you know what I mean? And her village to this day still doesn't have electricity. So the idea of doing art full time is just such a foreign concept to my mother. So one day I called her, right? Because I felt like I had to tell her. So I called her and I said, "Hey, Ma, so I'm gonna take a break from school. Hold on, and I'm gonna leave my job. Hold on, and I'm gonna do poetry full time." And she went, like the phone went dead silent. Like I thought she either hung up or had a heart attack. I didn't know which happened, right? And I waited, and she says, "Well, I don't know you to make a lot of bad decisions. So if this is what you want to do, I trust you." And initially, I was on the fence, right? Like I wasn't sure if I really wanted to do it full time. But the fact that my mother supported it, that was what gave me that extra push to do it, right? So this is what I do full time now. And what's really interesting is that like I come across some very interesting conversations along the way, right? Like I remember I was on a plane, And this guy next to me, we were just having a conversation, and he says, so he's like, so what do you do for a living? And I was like, oh, I'm a full-time poet. He was like, oh, wow, you know? And I was like, so what do you do for a living? He's like, oh, so I organize food so that it looks good in pictures. And I was like, excuse me? He's like, yeah, that's what I do. And I was like, wait, so you don't like take the picture? He was like, oh no, I don't take the picture. And I was like, so you don't cook the food? He's like, oh no, I'm not a chef. And I was like, so you just organize it? He was like, yeah, man, I love it. It's my passion. And I was like, all right. He had a business card and everything. I forget what his actual title was, but I was like, you know what? Because what's really fascinating to me is that even to this day, I think at times we still see that we have this perception that there are only a few professions available, right? Like doctor, lawyer, what have you, right? And I think what's really amazing is that if you're passionate about something, you know, if you love something, there is a way to make a living doing it, right? And I know a lot of you are in the process of figuring out what you're going to do, you know, potentially for the rest of your life as a career. And I know sometimes we're very tempted by the idea of, oh, let me figure out something that's going to make me the most money. But what's really fascinating, right, is that there are so many professions out there, and there are so many people who have so many different interesting passions that they've figured out a way to make a living off of those passions. So if there's something that you're really, really passionate about, something that you love, I challenge you to figure out a way to do that as your profession. There's nothing like waking up in the morning and saying, you know what? I get to go to work today. Instead of, wow, I have to go to work today. Like, those are two very different statements. And since I decided to do this full time, like, I wake up and I'm just so excited. Even on days where like I only sleep a couple hours. Sometimes I'm on 5 a.m. flights or I have to like drive far distances to like get to where my performances are. But like throughout the whole time, I'm just like, wow, like I get to do this, you know. And there's absolutely nothing like that. Also a side note, like I said, the interesting conversations that I have with people. So I was doing a show in Poughkeepsie, New York, and one of the students, he had asked me, he was like, what were you like in high school? And I was like, I was really shy, really quiet, super awkward, right? How many were awkward in high school? How many? Everybody. That's awesome. I feel like I'm amongst my people. So he had asked me, he was like, so what were you like in high school? And I was like, I was really shy, really quiet, super awkward, right? And he says, so what did you do to transition out of your awkward teenage phase? And I was like, well, I became an awkward adult. And he said, so there's no hope for me? And I was like, ugh, I don't know your situation, you know? But he had asked me, he was like, what would you say to your younger self if you could? And I think as leaders, it's very important to be reflective, right? I think sometimes, you know, we're in these leadership positions and we're, you know, giving people tasks and executing tasks as well. And I feel like sometimes we don't really take the time to be like reflective, right? And we need to have a lot of inner dialogue as well about like the things that we're doing, how effective they are, and what have you. So I decided to like write this poem, and initially it was a letter to myself in the present, and then I was like, you know what? I think what would be really fascinating if I wrote a letter to my younger self, right? So this is a letter to my younger self. If you're ready for the poem, say, let's go. All right. So, if you were to find an old calendar, strap it to a hospital bed, tie it down by its weekends, C-section the belly of 1999, there you will find a teenage version of me. Back when I was a tsunami of awkward moments splashing against the shoreline called Rochelle Moss. A young lady who introduced my jaw to the floor whenever she floated into our first period classroom, this girl. She was a dandelion seed on a wish. She was a dream I never thought would turn flesh and grin, but wire hangers like me, let's just say we don't become captain of the football team. The only thing that we're good at is stopping ourselves from saying I like you to a girl that holds the remote control to our smiles. We are blurry silhouettes against the backdrop of everything popular, often wearing our skin like a costume of someone we didn't feel comfortable pretending to be anyways. We swallow earthquakes and then we tremble at the smell of perfume. We are bashful, we are tongue-tied, and we are nervous in high definition. So the question is, if a boy falls for a girl that's out of his league and there's no one around to hear him, does he make a sound? The answer is hell, and the first two letters of nothing. When I was a senior in high school, I was a pocket full of chalk dust. I was elevator music on a CD that started like a Volkswagen with a really bad transmission. At this age, I was a ballot box stuffed full of everyone's opinions except for my own. My swagger was like watching a Walkman trying to swallow a DVD. At this age, I walked as if I was concerned with how the ground would feel about my footsteps. And if I could just find a way to write a letter to that boy, that old sweater with itchy sleeves that I will someday grow out of, I would say there'll be days when you feel like a peacock without feathers. You will feel flightless and undeserving of attention. But listen, you have to stop getting out of bed like you're an oil spill. You're not a flat tire at 2 a.m., so stop acting like an accident, Rudy. You're not an accident, Rudy. You're an apple on a pine tree in a room full of lemons, and you come from a long line of Swiss Army pocket knives, men who are small, sharp, and dangerous when not handled carefully. Some days, I wish that my arms were 12 years long so I could reach all the way back there, grab you by the chest, punch you, and say, listen, you are the main character in a movie that I watch every time I see the inside of my eyelids. I told myself that I wouldn't spoil the ending, but I will tell you this. Your story starts off really slow. But it does get better. You don't have to believe me. Someday you'll see for yourself. And when you see Rochelle Moss at the senior prom, ignore the washing machine in your stomach. Tell her that she looks beautiful tonight. Extend your arm like a drawbridge to a castle that no one has visited in years. Say to her, will you dance with me? She says yes. Thank you. How are we feeling? Y'all still good? All right. So next story. So the next poem I'm going to do is called My Honest Poem, right? And not that my other poems aren't honest, right? Is that I think what's really important about leadership is also being honest, not only with the people around you, but being honest with yourself as well, right? And I remember like when I was first really getting into like performing, and I was getting into like doing competitions, and like a good friend of mine, Richard, right? Richard doesn't like poetry, but he supports me, right? So one day, because this is after I had started like, garnering a pretty like large following in our community, in our poetry community. And he tells me, right, so we're in a car, we're driving, I'm dropping him off. This is after a show. And he says, yo, Rudy, I don't understand any of your poems. And I was like, you've been watching me for like 4 years. And he's like, yeah, man. I just clap when it's over, because, and I was like, okay. And then he's like, you know what? You've become somebody in our community that people follow, right? That people want to be kind of like, because this was at a time where I had just really started like doing shows, and I was getting a pretty like large following. He was like, yo, you're a leader in our community, and I think you're doing our community a disservice by not being honest in your poems. He was like, the Rudy that I know, I don't really see on stage. One thing that he told me, he was like, all of your poems are about, and this is like at the time, all of your poems are about like saving people, and they're all very political. And he was like, yeah, that is a part of you, but like there's so much of you that never makes it to the stage that I want to see you bring some more of that, right? And I was like, and I never really noticed that. He was like, people are watching you, and if you're more honest, it's going to make the people who are up and coming, it's going to challenge them to be more honest as well. He's like, that's what being a leader is. It's setting the example, right? And I was like, huh, okay. So I wrote this poem called My Honest Poem, right? And another story, right? So there's this thing called the Individual World Poetry Slam. And it's the biggest individual poetry slam in the world, which is why it's called that, And how you can get in, right, is Either you have to win your City Slam series, or you can show up the day before the World Slam happens. They have this thing called a Last Chance Slam. And if you win the Last Chance Slam, you get an automatic bid into the World Slam, right? So the first year I competed in it, I took, out of the 80 poets, I took 17th, which I thought was cool, right? But I knew that I had a lot to work on, right? Then the next year, I took third, right? And I was like, okay, like I'm coming up, right? So, but I knew that I still had a lot to work on, right? And I think that's also another principle that I think of leadership is constantly looking at what you have to work on. Not only looking at your successes, but what are some of your what are some of your challenges, right? What are some of the opportunities that you have to get better? And one of the opportunities that I saw is that I felt like my writing wasn't as strong as it could be, right? And I read this book called The Music Lesson by Victor Wooten, and it has so many principles about performance in there. Though it was about a man who's a bass guitarist, so many of the principles applied to performance. So I read that book, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna compete in the World Slam again this coming year. And what happened was, so I had missed my City Slam series because I was traveling, so I had to do the Last Chance Slam. So what I was going to do is I had a few shows in Virginia, and the Last Chance Slam and the World Slam was happening in Charlotte that particular year. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do my shows in Virginia, and then I'm gonna go to Charlotte, and then I'm gonna get into the Last Chance Slam, right? That was the plan. So I do my shows in Virginia. I buy my train ticket. My train's supposed to leave at 8:35. I woke up at 8:40. Missed my train. So I'm looking up other train times. There's nothing that's gonna get me there in time. I'm looking up flights. I'm looking up buses. There's nothing that's going to get me there in time for the Last Chance Slam. So my friend Megan, she calls me. She also lives in Virginia. She's like, oh, hey, so you're on your train, right? So I'm like, so this is what happened. I was like, I just woke up. And she starts cussing at me immediately, right? To the point to where I'm like, yo, like, chill. Like, you don't know me like that, you know? So she's like, so what are you gonna do? And I was like, well, I looked up trains. I looked up pretty much any mode of transportation that I could possibly take at this point, and there's nothing that's gonna get me there in time. I would have to leave right now. So you know what? I'm just gonna get a flight, and I'm gonna go home, and I'm gonna try again next year. And she's like, absolutely not. I'm coming to get you. We're driving to Charlotte. And I was like, or that, like that's even better. You know what I mean? So we get to Charlotte just in enough time for me to put my name in the hat. Because how it works is, Last Chance Slam is only 12 slots, and there were 25 people who wanted to sign up. So the probability wasn't looking great, right? So I put my name in to see if I was actually gonna get in. And they put all the names in the hat. They pick out the first name, and it's mine, right? And I'm like, that's fantastic, right? And then a good friend of mine, his name gets called second. So I'm like, ooh, it's about to be real interesting. How slam works is that it's 5 judges. They drop the high, they drop the low, they add the middle scores, right? So perfect score is a 30. So first round, he goes up, he gets a 30. And I'm like, it's about to be a long night, you know? I go up, I get a 30. I'm like, okay, so we in the game, right? Second round, because it's 3 rounds total, he gets up, he gets another 30, right? And he looks at me like, so what you gonna do? I go up, I get a 30, and I'm like, oh, so that's what I did, right? So we're neck and neck. In the last round, I go up, I get a 30. He goes up, and he gets a 29.9. So I consoled him, and I celebrated at the same time, right? And that year, I became the first poet to win the Last Chance Slam, get into the World Slam, and then win the World Slam, right? So you can clap it up for that. So this is my honest poem. Here we go. I was born on July 27th. That makes me a Leo. I don't know what that means. I'm 5'6.5". I weigh 175 pounds. I don't know how to swim, and I'm a sucker for a girl with a nice smile and clean sneakers. I'm still learning how to whisper. I'm often loud in places where I should be quiet. I'm often quiet in places where I should be loud. I was born feet first, and I've been backwards ever since. I like ginger ale. A lot. I've been told that I give really bad hugs. People say that it feels like I'm trying to escape. Sometimes it's because I am. Secretly, I get really nervous every time someone gets close enough to hear me breathe. I have this odd fascination with things like sandcastles and ice sculptures. I assume it's because I usually find myself dedicating time to things that will only last a few moments. That's also why I tend to fall in love with things that won't love me back. I know it sounds crazy, but it's actually much easier than it seems. And to be honest, I think it's safer that way. See, relationships, they often remind me that I'm not afraid of heights or falling, but I'm scared of what's going to happen the moment that my body hits the ground. I'm clumsy. Yesterday, I tripped over my self-esteem. I landed on my pride, and it shattered like an iPhone with a broken face. Now, I can't even tell who's trying to give me a compliment. I've never been in the military, but I have this purple heart. I got it from beating myself up over things I can't fix. I know this sounds weird, but sometimes I wonder what my bed sheets say about me when I'm not around. I wonder what the curtains would do if they found out about all the things I've done behind their backs. I've got a hamper that's overflowing with really, really loud mistakes and a graveyard in my closet. I'm afraid that if I let you see my skeletons, you'll grind my bones into powder and get high on my fault lines. Hi, my name is Rudy. I enjoy frozen yogurt, people watching, and laughing for absolutely no reason at all. But I don't allow myself to cry as often as I need to. I have solar power confidence. I have a battery-operated smile. My hobbies include editing my life story, hiding behind metaphors, and trying to convince my shadow that I'm someone worth following. I don't know much, but I do know this. I know that heaven is full of music. I know God listens to my heartbeat on his iPod. It reminds him that we still got work to do. Thank you. How are we doing? We still good? So this next poem is, I have a daughter now. She's not like now, she's like a year and a half, but like, you know, she's still new, you know? And she's teaching me so much about, you know, about life and specifically she's teaching me a lot about what it means to be a man. I think at times, you know, as young men, we're taught really problematic things, right? And I think what's really going on in my life right now is that I'm deconstructing a lot of these things, right? So here's a poem about that. And the article says that the Mexican government confiscates approximately 30,000 illegal firearms per year. When the guns are taken, they get dismantled, and the metal is used to make other types of weapons that will later be utilized by their military. In 2012, Pedro Reyes, an artist from Mexico City, convinced his government to donate the guns to him, and he turned them into musical instruments. So, somewhere, there's a tambourine, a drum set, a guitar, all made out of things that were used to take people's lives, but now they create a sound that puts life back into people's bodies, which is to say a weapon will always be a weapon, but we choose how we fight the war. And from this, I learned that even the most destructive instruments can still create a melody worth dancing to. And sometimes, don't we also call that a battle? I wonder how long it took to convince the first rifle that it can hold a note instead of a bullet, but still fire into a crowd and make everyone move. When I was 6, I was taught how to throw a punch. In the 80s, that was the anti-bullying movement. The first time one of my classmates took a yo mama joke a little too far, I remembered my training, so I turned his nose into a fountain, my fist 5 pennies, I closed my eyes, I made a wish, I came home with bloody knuckles, and it was the first piece of artwork my family hung on the fridge. I remember staring at my hands the same way you stare at a midterm when all your answers are correct. I didn't know what class this was, but I did know I was passing, and isn't that what masculinity has become? A bunch of dudes afraid afraid of their own feelings, terrified of any emotion other than anger, constantly yelling at the shadows on the wall, but still haven't realized that we're the ones standing in front of the light. We learn how to dodge a jab. We learn how to step in before we swing. We learn the heart is the same size as the fist, but we keep forgetting they don't have the same functions. We keep telling each other to man up when we don't know what that means. We turn our boys into bayonets. We point them in the wrong direction. We pull their triggers, and then we ignore all the damage they're doing in the distance. The word repurpose, it means to take an object and give it amnesia. It means to make something forget what it's been trained to do so you can use it for a better reason. I am learning that this body is not a shotgun. I am learning that this body is not a pistol. I am learning that a man is not defined by what he can destroy. I am learning that a person who only knows how to fight can only communicate in violence, and that shouldn't be anyone's first language. I'm learning the difference between a garden and a graveyard is only what you choose to put in the ground. You see, once I came across a picture of a strange-looking violin. The caption said that it was made out of a rifle. I thought to myself, someday that could be me. Thank you. How are we doing? We good? Yeah. All right. So so this is my last poem. So throughout the past, I would say 15 years, right? I've been a resident advisor. I was president of my undergraduate student government, and I was in charge of pretty much restructuring the entire undergraduate student government because once I got into office, I realized that our charter and our bylaws were super outdated, our election process, everything, right? So I had to do a complete overhaul, and I worked really closely with our Dean of Student Affairs, and how I ended up in the PhD program to begin with, right, is, so one, I didn't want to be an adult yet, right, which is not a good way to choose your graduate schools. But I was like, well, I'm already living here for free. I wasn't ready to be an adult, and I was like, you know what, I do enjoy psychology. And my Dean of Student Affairs was like, well, if you want to stay and help restructure the graduate student government, I'll get you into any program that you want. I'll write you a letter of recommendation. You're pretty much in. So I was like, all right, well, let's do that, And I ended up being president of my graduate student government, overhauling that as well. And then after I left school and I left my job, I started running a poetry venue in San Diego, and I've been doing that for the past 5 years or so. So one thing that I've learned so much about leadership is that sometimes the small things, right? I know sometimes we have little hiccups every now and then where things don't get executed the way that we want, or things kind of don't pan out the way that we'd like it to. And I've learned that we can't let those things get us down, right? We can't just sit and complain about those things. We have to figure out ways in which we can fix them, especially if they're important to us. And if they're not, then we kind of have to let those go, right? And I've been thinking a lot about the small things at times that I find myself complaining about, and I wrote this poem. Here we go. It's I wrote it for me, but also I suppose it applies to other people as well. So here we go. My last poem. Are y'all ready? Yeah. All right, here we go. The following are all true stories. May 26, 2003, Aaron Ralston was hiking. A boulder fell on his right hand. He waited 4 days. Then he amputated his own arm with a pocket knife. On New Year's Eve, a woman was bungee jumping in Zimbabwe. The cord broke. She then fell into a river and had to swim back to land in crocodile-infested waters with a broken collarbone. Claire Champlin was smashed in the face by a 5-pound watermelon being propelled by a slingshot. Matthew Brobus was hit by a javelin. David Striegel was actually punched in the mouth by a kangaroo. The most amazing part of these stories is when asked about the experience, they all smiled, shrugged, and said, I guess things could have been worse. So go ahead, Tell me that you're having a bad day. Tell me about the traffic. Tell me about your boss. Tell me about the job you've been trying to quit for the past 4 years. Tell me the morning is a townhouse burning to the ground. Tell me the morning is a townhouse burning to the ground. Tell me the morning is a townhouse burning to the ground. Tell me the alarm clock is a fire extinguisher. Tell me the alarm clock stole the keys to your smile, drove it into 7 a.m. and the crash totaled your happiness. Tell me how blessed are we to have tragedy so small it can fit on the tips of our tongues. When Evan lost his legs, he was speechless. When my cousin was assaulted, she didn't speak for 48 hours. When my uncle was murdered, we had to send out a search party to find my father's voice. Most people have no idea that tragedy and silence often have the exact same address. So when your day is a museum of disappointments, hanging from events that were outside of your control, when you find yourself flailing in an ocean of why is this happening to me, when it feels like your guardian angel put in his 2-week notice 2 months ago and just decided not to tell you, when it feels like God is a babysitter that's always on the phone, when you get punched in the esophagus by a fistful of life, remember that every year 2 million people die of dehydration. So it doesn't matter if the glass is half full or half empty, there's water in the cup. Drink that shit and stop complaining. You see, muscle is created by repeatedly lifting things that have been designed to weigh us down. So when your shoulders feel heavy, you gotta stand up straight. You gotta lift your chin. You gotta call it exercise. Remember that life is a gym membership with a really complicated cancellation policy. Remember that you will survive. Remember, things could be worse. Remember, we are never, ever, ever given anything that we can't handle. When the world crumbles around you, sometimes you gotta look at the wreckage and then build a new one out of all the pieces that are still here. Remember that you are still here. The human heart beats approximately 4,000 times per hour, and each pulse and each throb and each palpitation is a trophy engraved with the words, you are still alive. Oh, you are still alive. So act like it. Thank you. That's my time.
Encore. Funny you say that. There will be a slight encore, not me. Hello, my name's Tamara Crooks. Some of you know me. My name is still Tamara Crooks. I'm Leadership Coordinator in the Leadership Center and Student Involvement. It is my pleasure to welcome you all here, and thanks so much for being here. That was Rudy. Can we have one more round of applause for Rudy? That was awesome. I have a few quick announcements, and then we'll be breaking for workshop block 1. Rudy's workshop will be in this room, so if you do want a bit of an encore, Rudy's workshop will be in this room.
And I think that's a really beautiful experience. And since we had so many international students, we wanted to do that for our student population. So we would do that like once a semester. We also put on... we got I forget what the company was called, but they have like those huge boxing gloves, and like we got like a few of those, and people could get in the ring and they could like box a little bit. Of course, nobody got hurt because they were super like heavy and large. But yeah, those are some of my favorite programs that I put on. Yes. My inspiration. So I have a lot of different inspirations for various reasons, right? So of course my mother, just because watching her, because my mother, like I said, while I was doing the keynote, my mother grew up without electricity, right? So it's awesome to see like, because I mean like she like functions, like she knows how to use a computer, like she's like super into electronics, and like she didn't have any of that like for most of her life. So like watching her just adapt to things so quickly has always been an inspiration for me. It made me realize that we don't really have a whole lot of limitations if we're willing to take the time to learn, right? So is my mother. My father, super brilliant man. He has 1 million degrees, right? Like one time I was in the shed and I was like opening boxes because I was looking for something, and I found a box of like my father's degrees, right? And he has these are just the ones that I remember. He has a bachelor's in agriculture, psychology, sociology, business. He also has an MBA. He has a master's in human resource management. He has a real estate license. He has like a certificate in hypnotherapy. He also has, my dad also has a JD because he wanted to practice law for a while as well. So he just went to school like his whole life. And I think that's super inspirational just because like even when he was old, like he still wanted to learn. And that's super inspiring, you know what I mean? Because like me, like I always like want to learn like new things because I saw my father always learning new things. Also, you know, I'm a huge fan of Chance the Rapper, you know what I mean? So he's also an inspiration to me. And one of the things that I love about Chance is that like I think at a time like this, right, where there's so much going on in our world, there's so many things that are depressing, right? And I think it's amazing to see somebody make music that makes you feel joyful. And I feel like there isn't a lot of that, especially not in hip hop, right? Hip hop is a lot about, you know, being in the club, throwing money, whatever, you know. But to see Chance just like be joyful, right? Like listening to his music just makes me smile, you know. And I think right now we need that so much. So Chance, who else? I'm a huge fan of Cornel West. I read a lot of Cornel West. But I think those are like my biggest inspirations as far as like, you know, people that I look up to. Also like, you know, as far as like writers go, I'm a huge fan of Javon Johnson, who's a brilliant writer, Imani Cezanne, Teresa Siagotono. Those are some of the poets that really come to my mind when I think about the poets who inspire me. So all of those people are my inspirations. Yes. Yeah, I think so. I think it's helped me in a lot of ways because before, like, I didn't really speak to people. You know, I was like I said, I was super shy, really quiet, really awkward. And I think becoming a writer and becoming a performer has made me a lot more comfortable in front of audiences. And I think at least like with me, like I'm not like I always get stage like fright a little bit, you know, but I've figured out how to handle it just because I've been in front of people so often. So I think it does. I think it allows you to practice in front of people. And I think when you practice anything over and over again, you naturally just get better at it. Yes.
Typical performance piece take?
So it varies, right? So I try to write I try to make time to write every day. Now that doesn't always happen, but I always set aside an hour a day that is designated for writing. Now, if writing happens in that hour, then it does. If it doesn't, then that's fine as well. But what I notice that at times, if you don't make the time for things, they just don't happen. So I try to do that, right? But how my poems usually come about is I wake up, it's like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, oh, I need to write that down. Like that's how most of my poems start, right? So I write it down. I'm either like typing it in my phone or on my laptop real quick, and then I read it, and I'm like, okay, that sounds good. And then I wake up, and I'm like, what is this? Because a lot of times like it looked good when I went to sleep, but when I wake up, I'm like, I don't know what I'm saying here. So then I have to go back and I have to kind of shape it, right? And how I shape it is I ask myself questions as if I'm not the person writing it. Because I think sometimes when we write something, there are parts that only we understand, which is fine if that's your goal. But if you want to perform it in front of people and you want people to get the whole thing, sometimes you got to provide context in certain places. So that's like that next phase of writing is to go through it and give context to certain things that I think may not be as clear, and then figure out like how I want to wrap it up. That's usually the process. Yeah. Yes, right here. Yeah, I think the most impactful way I've seen diversity come together is recently. I think whenever marginalized groups feel under attack, I think they often bond together. Like they see that, okay, we have like a common threat, right? And I think right now I've seen so much of that where people who are from various groups who don't normally even interact with each other like feel that we are at a time in our lives where there's so much uncertainty, and there's so many people who don't feel safe that we're like, okay, we need to stick together to make sure that we all survive, right? And I think that's a beautiful thing that I've seen lately. And I think we can continue to do that by dialoguing across groups, because even though I feel like it's happening more now, I don't think it's happening enough. I think at times we still see our own struggles as our own struggles, and not realizing that our struggles are actually very interconnected, even more so than we actually give credit. So I think dialoguing across cultures is super important, and across groups, just so that because I think at times, like I said, we feel alone when in actuality we're not. Yeah. Yes.
Does Rochelle Moss know that you still tell stories about her?
Kind of, right? So this is the story, right? He asked if Rochelle Moss still knows that I tell stories about her. So crazy story. I ran into Rochelle Moss about 8 months ago, right? So I ran into her in the mall, right? And we said hello and whatnot. And she was like, oh, so what are you up to now? I was like, oh, I do poetry. And she was like, oh, that's cool, And I was like, yeah, I have this poem about you. She's like, what? And I was like, oh, don't even worry about it. It's not. But she was like, there's a poem about me? I was like, yeah, I had a crush on you in high school, but, it's not a big deal. Let's not make it a thing, Because she's also married, and I didn't want to make it awkward. But she does know that there is a poem about her. Yeah. Yes.
Have you ever worked with or met, or if not, would you work with Sarah Kay?
Yeah, I know Sarah. Yeah. So all the poets on YouTube, we all know each other. Yeah. Yeah. So I've actually done a couple shows with Sarah Kay. And she's awesome. She's amazing. I'd be open to doing it again. And every now and then, because sometimes, when I get booked at university, sometimes they'll book 2 poets, and usually, we know each other. So a lot of times, I do end up working with other poets. And also, there's the National Poetry Slam, which happens every August, and there's usually five people to a team. And we spend the entire summer writing poems together and performing together. So there is a lot of collaboration that happens. Yes.
If you ever run into writer's block, an obstacle, or some type of rut that you may be in, is there any specific techniques that you use to stay creative?
Yeah. So writer's block is a natural thing that just happens, right? And usually what I try to do is I try not to force it. I believe that poems will start and finish themselves when they're ready to be started and finished, right? So if I come across writer's block, usually I'll take a break. I'll go for a walk. I'll read. I'll watch poetry on YouTube, or I'll read poetry. So those are some of the things that I do. And if nothing comes, then, I kind of just let it rest until it's ready to be finished, I think sometimes we want to rush things. We want things to be done, right away. And that, unfortunately, that's not really how art works, you know what I mean? So I just try to be patient with the process and let the poem finish and start itself whenever it's ready to do so. All right here.
You share a lot of personal and emotional moments of your life through your poetry. How do you handle that feeling of vulnerability in front of all your audience?
Yeah, she asked how I handle the feeling of vulnerability in front of my audiences. And what's really interesting is that, to be honest, I don't know any of you, So it's actually a lot easier because I get to just tell you all of my business and then all right, y'all have a good day, and then I'm gone. I think what would be a lot more difficult if it were people that I knew, people that I saw every day, I think that's even more challenging than performing in front of strangers. So I mean, with strangers, you know what I mean? I don't see it as a big deal because for the most part, I see people once and then I leave. I think the more challenging part is actually performing in front of people that that you're gonna see again. Because then they have follow-up questions. They're like, oh, so you said such and such. So what did you mean by that? And then you have to answer. So I think performing in front of people that is actually a lot more difficult. Yeah. Yes.
How do you decide on topics that you want to write about?
Mm-hmm. So for the most part, I write about whatever comes to mind. But every now and then, I have friends who are also writers, and they give me writing prompts. So when I can't think of anything to write about, when I feel like I'm out of subjects, I'll just contact one of my friends. I'm like, hey, I'm kind of stuck. Do you have a writing prompt for me? Something that you would want to see me add to my arsenal of work already? And they'll shoot me a topic, and then sometimes I'll just write it. You could also look up writing prompts, too. You just put in writing prompts in Google, and a million of them pop up. Yeah. There's a question over here. Yeah.
What kind of impact are you working on your audience?
You know, I think my biggest goal is to let people know that they can also do this. Because so many people are terrified of speaking in front of people. So many people are terrified of sharing their writing. There's so many people who write who would never even admit it, right? And I think my biggest goal is to let people know that, like, there are people who would love to hear your story. And there are people who are going through the exact same thing that you're going through, who also need your narrative, right? I think one of the reasons why I fell in love with poetry is because I saw somebody do a poem about something that I was also going through, and I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. So a lot of this is my way of kind of just paying it forward, right? And I think my secondary goal in all of this is to debunk the idea that you have to be a starving artist, right? Because like a lot of poets, even a lot of poets in our community don't really believe that they can make a living doing poetry full time, and that's not true. Like, I have several friends who this is what they do, like, and also myself. And I think with the impact that we're having, like, on our communities and going out and letting people know, you can do this full time, and this is how you go about doing it. I think that's also a secondary impact that I would like to have, to the point to where one day, I want to see and or hear a kid say, you know what, when I grow up, I want to be a poet, and have nobody like snicker about it. Like, that is, like, of course that's a long way out, but I think that's one of my goals as well. Yes.
When you were first getting started, how did you build your confidence to know when a poem was good?
You know what? To this day, I still don't know. I'm still working that out, right? So a lot of it is just trial and error. Like, when I write something, sometimes I think it's good, and then the next day I'm like, this is terrible. So a lot of it's trial and error. I try stuff out in front of an audience. The open mic scene is actually a really good place to just try stuff out, right? So whenever I have something new, like, I'll go to an open mic and I'll do it, and I'll see how the crowd reacts, and I'll see how I feel about it, and then I'll adjust accordingly. So sometimes I honestly don't know. So a lot of it is just trial and error for me and adjusting along the way. Yeah. We'll go. Oh, you asked the one already, right? So I'll come back to you. We'll go here.
How long does it typically take you to memorize?
Memorizing actually doesn't take very long, because I think we retain a lot more information than we actually realize that we do. I'm pretty sure anybody in here could do like 30 songs, like, right off top, right? Just because you've heard them so many times, you've sang along so many times. So with me, like, I'll go through and I'll edit for like weeks at a time, and by the time I'm done editing, it's pretty much already in there. So, like, my last phase is just like getting up and performing it over and over again until I have it solidified. Yeah. We'll go here.
Have you ever done any other types of performing, like theater or anything like that?
I haven't, just because I feel like I could only be myself, Like, I don't really know how to be anybody else. But I would be interested, but also, like, I also have kind of stage fright, and I'm also awkward. So I don't know. As of right now, poetry is like the only art form that I dabble in. But maybe someday. Yeah. We'll go right here.
What have you done to perfect your delivery over the years for your performances?
He said, "What have I done to perfect my delivery?" I don't think it's perfect. I'm still working on it. But I perform in front of the mirror a lot, actually. So I try to, like, look at myself to see, like, what I do while I'm performing. Sometimes I watch videos of myself, which is, I hate watching myself, but I have to do it, just to see what I look like when I'm on stage. And I'm always in constant critique mode. So I think that's what's really helped me throughout the years. And also over the summers, like, we're prepping for nationals and whatnot. So we do a lot of feedback sessions too. So that has also helped. Yeah, so I think all of those things have kind of helped me hone my performance. We'll go here.
Have you ever gotten into commissions?
Commissions? Yeah, actually I have. So every now and then, not very often, every now and then, like, I'll get contacted by an organization, and they'll ask me to write something for like one of their events, or I've been asked to write for commercials. Like, none of them have been picked up yet, but every now and then, like a company will hit me up, and they'll ask if I could, like, write a poem about their product. And I've done that a couple of times, but only with products that I would actually use myself. Like, nothing that, it would be difficult for me to write something for something that I didn't believe in. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Have you heard of the program Louder Than the Bomb?
Yeah.
Would you use, like, your experience in student leadership
for those who aren't familiar, they're a youth organization in Chicago. And they put on, well, because it's ran by YCA, which is Young Chicago Authors. And they put on Louder Than a Bomb, which is a tournament. It's a poetry slam. They have several of them. The biggest one in Chicago, they have like 100 teams, I believe. And then they have them in like 7 or 8 other cities as well. And they also have a curriculum as well. So there are also other organizations that also have curriculum, like Say Word in LA has a curriculum, Get Lit has curriculum. Sacrificial Poets in North Carolina also has curriculum. So there are quite a few of these organizations around the country, Louder Than a Bomb being the most popular one. But I do recommend it because I think a lot of teachers at the high school level are interested in implementing spoken word into their curriculums, but they don't really know how to do it. So I think adopting a spoken word curriculum like Louder Than a Bomb definitely helps them make that transition a whole lot easier. So I do recommend it. Louder Than a Bomb, or because all of them are different. So I think going out and finding out which ones are best suited for what you would like to do. I believe that there should be some research done as well. I think some people they default to like whatever they know, and I think it's important for them to do research on all the programs and find out which one works best. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Going once, going twice. All right.
So I am currently a health educator here at WSU, which means that I do a whole bunch of different workshops on topics related to health, and that's a holistic view of health. So I do stuff that's on like physically, staying healthy, flus, stuff like that. I also do sexual assault prevention stuff, suicide prevention, stress management. Today we're talking about self-care, self-compassion. And so I'm really happy to see this many people here today that you're interested in these topics, because it's not something that's talked about a whole ton, but it's really gonna help make you a holistically healthier person, body and mind. So let's get into it. Why does this matter? Why should you care about self-care and self-compassion? Well, every year at WSU, every 2 years, Health and Wellness Services does a survey called the National College Health Assessment. And we get information from thousands of students across the campus on things that are affecting their health. And here are some of the statistics that we found. 83% of our students are feeling overwhelmed with everything that they have to do. So this could be school things they have to do, school obligations, life obligations, trying to make the finances work, whatever. Our students are feeling overwhelmed at some point during the year with the amount of stuff that they have to get done. So if you're in that boat too, you're thinking, yeah, I'm volunteering, I'm a leader, and whew, it's a lot. Hey, you're not alone, right? There's other people out there. We also know that when people are feeling overwhelmed, some of that has to do with academic difficulties. So 46% of our students said, yeah, I had some trouble in one of my classes last year. I'm having some trouble, getting those test grades, writing the papers, writing the lab reports. So that's a fair portion of our student population here as well. And what happens when people are overwhelmed and they're really struggling with classwork? Well, they don't sleep as much. So 90% of students who responded to this survey said that they went to class sleepy at least 1 day a week. So we're not getting the amount of sleep that we need because we're trying to cram in all the other stuff I'm trying to do in my extracurriculars. And that can lead to some physical and mental sicknesses and illnesses, right? We know that sleep's important to us. So maybe related to this, we have another 50% of our students who had high or tremendous amounts of stress over the last year. And even more shocking, 56% of students reported having overwhelming anxiety at some point over the last academic year. So wow, we have some students who are really struggling here in college. This isn't just at WSU, this is kind of colleges across America have similar numbers here. And are struggling with trying to balance everything, right? And that's where self-care and self-compassion really comes into it, because I can't make these numbers go away. I can't magically take away your stress, but I can help you deal with it a little bit better and say, you know what do I need to take time for in order to mentally prepare myself for moving forward? And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. Not how do you get rid of your stress, but how can you frame it in a way that's going to make you productive, and how can you balance out the things that you need to do to make yourself the best possible student leader that you can be. So that's what we're getting on board with today. Okay, so I have a question for you. What are you stressed about right now? What's stressing you out? I'd love a couple hands up here. Yeah. Your responsibilities? Can you be a little more specific? Right, okay, so I've got academics, extracurriculars, job as an RA. All right, what else are you stressed about? Yeah. Cost of college. I feel that. Yeah, out of state. Hey, I'm international. Do you know where I'm from? Canada, yeah, it's the same accent. So I feel those tuition fees. What else are you stressed about? Let's get one more. Yeah.
Like family and friends.
Sure, family and friends, relationship stressors as well. Great. So we got a kind of a variety of answers here. We got some school obligation stuff. We got some financial stressors. There's some relationship stressors in there. And those are all things you're going to have throughout your life. And they're not going to go away. You're always going to have some stress about your work or your school and your friends and your relationships that you're with and how you're paying for everything. And so these things can affect each other. And often we only think about the stress of that test coming up or the stress of writing a resume for that specific job. And that's the main focus that you have. We have to think holistically. Yeah, my whole life is kind of battling for my attention here. And that can all add up together. I got another couple questions for you. On a scale of 1 to 10, how stressed are you right now? Just yell out some numbers at me. 10, 4. The scale's 1 to 10. I know this says 11. I got a 0, a 3. Okay. So we've got a range here. What was the highest point of your stress? Let's say last semester. This semester's pretty early on. Highest number you got to? 11. What? Your first semester? Well, then, you know, how stressed are you right now, or how stressed have you been this semester? 10? Yeah, like can't deal with it anymore? I really like this graphic, especially because of the hands. I can just really feel that stress of you're like, I don't know what to do with my hands anymore, but they're definitely clenched in some like not normal way. I can relate to that. So now I have another question for you. What number of stress are you capable of dealing with and still getting stuff done? So I can get up to this number and I'm still okay, I'm trucking through it, I'm getting things done. Where's your number of what you can deal with? 4, 8, 7, 10? I think we need to recalibrate if we're on a 0 to 10 scale. Maybe we have to recalibrate where our 10s are at. So what I can hear from this room, though, is that we have different levels of stress that we can cope with. And that's normal, that's natural, right? And so my whole stress management technique is not getting rid of stress because it's going to be there, but saying, how can I take the stress that I have and still be productive? How can I take the stress that I have and say, this is okay, it's good for me, it's motivating me to work harder, and I can deal with it. And then maybe you can move from a 3 is where I can't cope anymore and I need some help, to moving to a 5, to moving to a 7, and being like, yeah, I can be at a 7 out of 10 on the stress scale, and I'm taking names and I'm getting stuff done, right? Because I'm capable of coping with that. And that's kind of the stress management trick. So we know that stress is not inherently bad for you. This is a thing, it's called the Yerkes-Dodson curve. And they did stress experiments, Yerkes-Dodson did stress experiments with rats. Same thing has been found in humans. What they found is that we need some stress in our lives in order to be really optimally good in our performance, in order to be achieving things, having high quality performance, good problem solving skills. If I don't have any stress, I'm bored, I'm tired, I don't want to get out of bed, right? That's that like summer that I had off from college and I thought this is going to be great, and then I just wore pajamas and didn't get out of bed till 2 and I hated my life because I had nothing motivating me to get going, right? So we need to have some stress in order to be really optimally at our peak of performance. I'm good at problem solving, I'm thinking critically, but if I get overstressed, here I start to be ineffective. My problem solving skills, they get a little worse. I'm making crazy decisions and being like, yeah, it'll work. And everyone knows that's not, a great time. And this is also where you start to get more sick, physically and mentally. You're more tired, you're just not effective. So you have to find where is your peak level of stress, right? What can you handle? And then try to stay there. And then know how can I balance what's going on in my life in order to stay somewhere within that spectrum of where I'm really good, I can handle what's being thrown at me. And that's going to be different person to person, but you can build skills so that you can take on more stress and still be at that optimal level. So I've been talking a lot about stress management. I want to know, what do you do to deal with your stress? How do you cope with it? Apparently, if you Google stress management, you get a bunch of white ladies just biting on some computers. And I haven't personally tried this technique, but Google stock images would tell me that it's a winner. But what are you doing? What are you doing to manage your stress? Planner. What else? Music. Ice cream. Nap? Napping. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the stress nap. Exercise. What else? Yeah. Crying. Yeah, I stress cry too. Undergrad, I definitely had a stats class that I turned in the final exam with tear stains on it because I just broke down in the middle of the big auditorium and sobbed. Happens, yeah. Counseling, great. So maybe getting some professional help in there. What else do you do? It's really stressed. You're at a 10 out of 10. You can't really handle it right now. What are you doing to cope with your stress? Call your parents. Work out, great. So we got a whole wide range of activities I'm hearing there. And we all have some things that we like to go to that make us feel a little bit better in the moment to help cope with that stress. But I want to think about framing what we're choosing as our stress coping mechanism, okay? And is this way that I'm dealing with my stress, is this actually helpful in the long run? Is this helping me address the underlying issues that I'm having that are making me stressed? Is this moving me forward in a place that I want to be? Or is it unhelpful? Maybe I feel better in the moment, but this isn't actually moving me towards solving my problem. This isn't helping reduce my overall stress. So I have some examples here. Lots of these are what you told me. Lots of them are not. What I want you to do, I'm going to give you just 2 minutes. Turn to a partner next to you. And if you're just watching in today on our global campus, go ahead and think these through. You can say them out loud if you want. Turn to the person next to you and say, helpful, unhelpful. Why? Just going down this list. Talk to each other. Hey. Thanks for participating. Great. So let's run through a few of these, and you can help me out here. Let's start with exercising. Heard that from a couple of people in the audience. Helpful, unhelpful? Helpful, helpful, why? Go ahead. Okay, you're letting go of the stress. Why else is this helpful? Yeah.
It makes you more healthy, so and it allows your blood to kind of flow and allows you to stay in skin.
Sure. So exercise is making you physically healthy. We also know that exercise really affects your mental health, so it's making you more mentally healthy as well. Great. So this is a helpful thing to do for my body. That's going to be, if I'm in better shape mentally and physically, I'm better able to deal with stress. All right. What about drinking a nice old bottle of wine? Now, I know not all of you are 21. Okay, so this is a hypothetical bottle of wine. I'm over 21, so it's okay for me. Is this helpful or unhelpful for me? Unhelpful. How come? Yeah. Sure, so it's going to become a behavior that I'm turning to and maybe more of a problem there. Okay. Why else might this be unhelpful? Yeah.
Because alcohol is depressant.
Alcohol is a depressant. That's true. So maybe the first glass of wine I'm feeling okay, and then by the time I get to the end of that bottle, well, I don't feel any less stressed. I'm just a little sadder about it. Sure. Yeah. Right, so this might lead to other consequences after that are still not helping me with my stress. Okay, what about ignoring the problem and watching some Netflix? Unhelpful? Why unhelpful? Right, I'm not addressing that underlying problem. I'm not doing anything about the stress, right? I'm just putting it on hold. Guess what? It's still going to be there after. Sure. What about calling mom or a family member? Why helpful? Someone over here. Yeah. Sure. So talking with your family parents, or your family or your parents, they're close to you. They're going to let you talk things off, get it off your chest, maybe give you some advice, hear what you're saying. Great. Yeah, and also maybe this is something that's really valuable to you, right? And this is a relationship that then you're building by calling them. How about going for taking a nap? Taking a nap. Helpful, unhelpful? Why helpful? Who said helpful? Yeah, why helpful? You can clear your mind? Okay, what else? Why else is this helpful? Yeah. Right, sometimes I need that sleep. I'm just not functioning because I'm really tired and I need to get some sleep in. Okay, who said unhelpful? Yeah, why unhelpful? Right, so is it I really need some sleep, or is it kind of like ignoring it and watching Netflix, ignoring it and having a nap and being like, I'm just gonna sleep and then I'll deal with this later, right? So we have to consider, well, what are my underlying motivations here? Why am I taking this nap? Do I need it? Is this gonna help me feel better? Or am I just like taking off 2 hours of my day and snoozing in my bed with my cat? So we can do this with all the rest of them. I'm not gonna go through all of them. But if you can weigh this out, I'm feeling stressed, I want to do something about it, well, let's weigh out, is this actually helping me deal with my stress? Or is this actually moving me farther away from a solution here? And some of these can be both. Exercising can be both as well. Yeah, going for a run, hitting the gym, playing a game of like basketball or whatever with your friends, that can be really helpful. But if I'm going to the gym for 2 hours a day, every day, because I just don't want to deal with my problems, maybe that's not as helpful, right? So you have to kind of think about, why am I doing this? What's the result going to be? So you can ask yourselves these questions. Does it move you closer towards a value that you have, something that's important to you, or towards a goal? Is this addressing those underlying problems that are causing my stress? Or is this really just temporarily making me feel better? And sometimes we like to go for that temporarily, well, you know what, the ice cream tastes real good, so I'm gonna eat it. And that's not a bad thing. You can do that sometimes. But no, this isn't solving the source of my stress. This isn't helping me fix this problem at all. So this brings me on now, this is kind of stress relief, right? But this ties really closely to self-care. So what is self-care? Anyone wanna give me an estimate? Approximate definition? I don't need an exact definition. Yeah.
It's like behavior that you take specifically to care for yourself, or like to help relieve symptoms of stress.
Okay, so steps that you take to take care of yourself and help relieve symptoms of stress? Yeah, what are you gonna say? Making sure your basic needs are met, yeah. So self-care includes any intentional action that you do to take care of your physical, mental, or emotional health. And so this might be, I'm feeling stressed, so I'm gonna do some self-care, but it also has to do with just those basic needs. Am I taking care of myself as an adult, right? And a lot of these tend to be similar to those stress relief activities, but there's other things that we do for self-care as well. So sometimes, especially here in America, when we think of self-care, we think of treat yourself, right? Not feeling so good, I'm gonna go get a manicure, I'm gonna go buy those nice shoes I've been looking at, treat myself to a nice meal out, I deserve it, right? And that's fine, and you do deserve to treat yourself to things sometimes. Is this helping you? Is this moving you towards something that you value or towards a goal that you have? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe if the goal is owning those sweet shoes. But really how we need to think of self-care is like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Are you familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Yeah, if you're not, right on the screen here, okay? So first of all, we need to meet those basic needs. Have I eaten today? Have I eaten vegetables today? Have I had a full night of sleep? Have I had water? Have I showered in the last day or so, right? And then I move up. Okay, what about my psychological needs? Do I have close family relationships? Have I called my parents recently? Have I called my sister recently? Have I spent time with my friends? Because I need those social interactions. And then I can move up from there, okay? Self-fulfillment. Am I volunteering enough? Am I living up to my own potential? Am I achieving higher goals that I have? But I can't achieve those higher goals of I want to do all of these extracurriculars and I want to get a 4.0 GPA and I want to be leader of this organization if I'm not meeting those basic needs, because that whole tower comes tumbling down. So we need to think about, am I doing those basic needs first? And I can build up from there. And self-care really involves all of those things. So here's another way that we can frame self-care. First of all, we need to meet those basic everyday needs. And so this involves things like brushing your teeth regularly, showering, taking the medicine that you went to the doctor to take, making an appointment to go see the doctor or the counselor or the psychiatrist to get that help that you need. Those are your basic needs, right? And we have to do those first. And then we have our physical needs: sleeping, eating healthy food, taking care of my body, exercising, right? If my body is not healthy, I can't do a lot of other things. And I don't mean that your body has to be fully able, but you're taking care of yourself in the way that you need to take care of yourself, right? I have my mental and my emotional needs. And so this might be expressing gratitude to other people. This is a great way to make yourself feel happier and more connected to the people around you. Recognizing that was really helpful and I appreciate it, and telling someone that, wow, you did this for me and that was great, or I just really appreciate having you in my life. Spending time with friends, taking time to laugh. Laughing is really good for you. It's really good for you physically. It reduces rates of heart attack. It reduces rates of cancer. It makes you feel better too. So if you're finding that you're really stressed or you're not taking care of yourself, have a little laugh break. It's a good time. And then after we do those things, I can really think of also about my spiritual and self-fulfillment needs. And so this comes down to, what do you value? What's important to you? And then doing things in line with that. So that could be volunteering to a cause that's important to you. It could be something religious like going to church, meditating, something that you really value and you're saying, this has meaning, and by me doing this activity, I'm making my life meaningful. And if I can find self-care activities that address all four of those, you're doing great. You're taking care of yourself holistically in a way that's going to make you a lot healthier physically, mentally, emotionally. And that's what self-care is about. So it's all about finding what works for you and making a decision that, yeah, I am going to take time. I'm going to do one of these activities. So what I want you to do now, one more time, turn to the person next to you. If you're at home and there's someone with you, turn to them. If not, maybe jot it down. What are 1 or 2 activities that you'll do this weekend to practice self-care? Turn to the person next to you. And not just treating yourselves. All right, so we're going to move on here to self-compassion. And what does self-compassion mean? So self-compassion is comprised of 3 different things. The first one is self-kindness. And so this means being understanding when something goes wrong rather than being critical. You're not going to be successful all of the time. We're all going to have little slip-ups, little failures, and that's normal. That's how we grow, right? So if you're teaching your cousin or your nephew, let's say, how to ride a bicycle, and they fall off the bicycle one time, are you going to be like, you're a loser, you can't even ride a bike? Don't even try again. You're never going to make it. Takes a little while to learn how to ride a bicycle, right? And so the same thing goes when we're learning new things. We're not going to get it right always the first time. Sometimes it takes a while. And so be understanding rather than being like, I should have done better, I should have gotten an A, I should have whatever. Well, maybe you will again. We have to show a little more understanding there. So there's the self-kindness aspect. Another aspect of self-compassion is recognizing common humanity. So knowing that I am more similar to other people then I am different. That my struggles relate to other people's struggles as well. And that I am not just one person here doing my own thing and no one understands me. I'm connected to this humanity. And that my struggle is a common human struggle. And that I'm not the only one doing these things. So the experiences that you have and the experiences that you're going through, we can think about how is this connecting me to other people rather than thinking of it as separating. So sometimes we get into our headspace and we think, I'm the only one, no one can understand, no one's in this position. And yes, you are unique. But the things that you're going through, other people are experiencing as well. And so trying to frame it as, well, how can I relate this to other people? The last part of self-compassion is mindfulness. And mindfulness, kind of a buzzword right now. We're going to talk about it a little bit more later. But it's just understanding what you're currently experiencing, physically, mentally, emotionally, what you're currently experiencing without judgment. So saying, okay, what am I actually doing right now? What am I actually experiencing? And then saying, that's okay and that's normal. So we're going to talk through each of these aspects of self-compassion, and we'll talk about how does this relate to self-care. So the first one is self-kindness. And this has to do a lot with self-talk. So that little voice that you have going on in your head, right? So we're going to do a little activity, again with a partner. What I want you to do is turn to your partner, and your partner's having a rough day, okay? They failed a test that they thought they were going to pass. They're not doing really good. They're thinking, I don't know, maybe I should just drop this class. I'm not sure if I can continue. Talk to them. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Talk to your partner. Help them out. Okay, great job. So, were you all just like putting on your best Leslie Knope face and being like, you're magical, you're going to get through this, I know you can do it, you just... what I want you to do now is you're going to talk with your partner again. You can switch roles if you want. So now your other friend, they're going through this rough time, they're failing this class, they're not sure if they're going to make it, and I don't know. And I want you to talk to them as you would talk to yourself in your own head if you were going through this. So your own little mental voice saying, I don't know if I can do this, maybe I should just drop out of my class, I'm not sure if I'm going to make it. Talk to your partner. Okay, I'm going to bring it back together. How many of you had the same conversation twice? Not many people. A couple. Okay. How many of you, when you talk to yourself, you tend to be a little more negative than when you're talking to a friend? Or a lot more negative. Yeah. Okay, I see a bunch of hands here. So often the way that we talk to ourselves, we would never say those things to someone else, right? I would never be like, you know what? You should just drop out. You're going to fail anyway. You're not worth it. You're not even good at math. I don't know why you chose to go to university. Just go be, whatever, a gas station attendant somewhere. Gas station attendants are great. I'm not knocking them, okay? I have some, but so the things that we say to ourselves, we don't find ourselves saying to other people, and that's part of self-kindness. Treat yourself the way that you would treat others, right? With that understanding. Now, self-kindness has a bit to do with self-esteem as well. Sorry, we don't have time for Jessica, but she's great. So self-esteem means that I'm confident in my own abilities, and this has a curve as well. I have to have some confidence in my abilities in order to be really productive and achieve things. But if I have too much self-esteem, I become less productive because I think that everything I do is golden, right? If I don't have enough self-esteem, I don't have the courage to go forth and put anything forward. So you have to have that medium level there where I'm kind and I'm understanding, but I'm still realistic about what's happening in the world. All right, we're going to move on to common humanity here. And I have a quick video I'm going to show you. Unfortunately, to the people who are on Global Campus, you won't get to see this video, but it's just a little short one. Relate to those, and we can say, wow, you're really going through a sad, stressful time right now, and I can relate to that, right? And then knowing that every experience that you have ties you closer to other people. Whether it's a happy experience or a sad one, it can give you a little bit more empathy and compassion to other people who are going through those same things. and finding that we really do have those similarities more than differences. So the last part of self-compassion I'm going to talk about today is mindfulness. And I mentioned earlier, mindfulness is simply paying attention to what's happening around you. On purpose, paying attention to what's happening around you, physically, emotionally, mentally, and then accepting it without judgment as this is the normal thing that's happening. It's not good or bad, it's just happening to me, and that's okay. It can be a really difficult thing to do. Often when we're in a room, we tend to have this little narration going on where we're thinking, this chair's really squeaky, it's kind of stuffy in here, oh my God, are we running out of time? And I have to do this later, and we tend to comment on things as we're experiencing each moment, right? So rather than thinking about those things and saying this is the good thing or this is the bad thing, just being like, yeah, that's a thing. It's not inherently good or bad. And that's one way that you can practice mindfulness. So I think we have to hand out some evaluations. I'm going to have those passed around. While you're filling it out, I'm just going to talk a little bit more about mindfulness for another 2 or 3 minutes. So pull out your pens, but I'm going to keep on talking here. So one way that you can practice mindfulness, there's lots of ways that you can practice mindfulness. I'll take a step back. So you can practice mindfulness by just being a mindful person. You can do mindful activities. So I can exercise and really think about physically, how is this affecting me? What are my muscles doing? How is my breath? I can eat mindfully and really focus on each bite that I'm eating and not have a conversation or be on my computer, just really focus on the food. I can walk to work mindfully, and so I take out my earplugs and I'm just really focusing on what's happening around me. You can do mindful meditations, and those are great as well. But one thing that I really like to do to practice the skill of mindfulness is these little mini doses of mindfulness. And mini doses of mindfulness you can do anywhere, anytime, and it has 3 really simple steps. So the first thing you have to do is acknowledge your feelings and emotions. And so I tend to do this when I am maybe doing an unhelpful reaction to stress. So we saw earlier those white women who were biting computers. I now have a white woman biting a steering wheel. It's an epidemic. I was not aware. So let's say that you're stuck in traffic because there's a Cougar football game and there's more people in Pullman than there normally is. And you're a little bit stressed and you're just like biting the steering wheel, right? Okay? So the first thing you have to do to be mindful is take a step back and say, what are my underlying emotions here? Well, I'm frustrated because I wasn't expecting this much traffic. And maybe I'm anxious because I think I might be late to that appointment. And I'm angry because that person just cut me off. And I'm thinking, okay, what are the underlying emotions that have brought me here to this reaction that I'm having? And then I have to do step number 2. And step number 2 is the hardest step. I have to allow myself to experience those emotions without judgment. So I'm not saying, your anger is unreasonable, Sarah. There's no reason for you to be frustrated. That's not a good feeling. All emotions are normal. So even if I'm feeling frustrated and angry and anxious, those are normal human emotions. And I have to say, that's okay. It's okay that you're frustrated right now. And then step number 3 is I move on with that knowledge. And maybe by moving on, I can just say, okay, 2 breaths. Good, no longer frustrated, let's keep driving. Maybe I can't just shut off my emotions that way. But what I can do is acknowledge where is my current emotional state and say, I'm already here, right? And so then throughout the rest of my day, I give myself a little more self-compassion. And I say, you know what, I'm already this frustrated today because of that traffic, so I'm gonna give myself 10 extra minutes to get to class. And when I talk with my sister on the phone, I'm gonna think twice before I talk back so I don't just snap at her and take out my frustrations on her. And maybe later on, I'm gonna make sure that I have time to go for that run or to have that nap, right? So I'm thinking, where is my emotional state and what actions can I do that are helpful in that state? The more often you're able to do this, acknowledge your emotions, say those emotions are normal. Those are normal things that people experience and it's okay. the better able I am to separate my emotions from my behavior. So I can say, even though right now I'm feeling sad, I can still choose the behavior that I want to do, and they don't have to be linked together. Even though right now I'm feeling really stressed, I can still choose the behavior I want to do and create a little distance between those two. And the more that you practice this, the easier it becomes for you to do that and to allow yourself to experience those emotions and then choose what you want to do next. So that's mindfulness. So if you are finding that you're really stressed and you want some more self-care tips on how to deal with stress, on how to incorporate mindfulness into your life, at WSU we have a free texting stress management program. So you can text this phone number here, 30644, with the message stress. That's going to go to me at Health and Wellness Services. And then we will send you weekly reminders of, hey, here's a stress management technique. Remember to breathe. Here's what you need to do. And we'll give you different tips on how to manage your stress in a helpful way. That's the information that I have today. I know I'm going over time. If you have more questions on any of this, you can email me here. Otherwise, have a great day. Do you have more feedback on the forms?
Can we give a round of applause for as far as the rest of the conference goes?
I got it. Right, friends, we're going to go ahead and get started. I don't know if you have anything to do. Great. So my name is Nicholas Hudson, and I am an assistant director in the Center for Fraternity and Sorority Life here at Washington State University, Pullman. And so I work with a lot of our sororities and fraternities here, but specifically I work with our multicultural and non-residential organizations. And I'll provide you just a little bit of information. What we're going to be talking about today is the Student Leadership Challenge by James Kouzes and Barry Posner, and how these 5 essential practices of leadership will make you into exemplary leaders. This book, the Student Leadership Challenge or the Leadership Challenge, has been around since the 1980s, and they've tailored it to working with students across the country. Millions of people have taken the survey that you are about to be taking as well. And so we're going to be learning about these 5 practices and how to make yourself achieve, and the teams that you're working with and folks of that nature, how they can make you into better leaders. So I'm still getting a little used to the technology. So a couple of things to note. As we move through these things, as I'm not a big fan of this, but you have to, as leaders, want to make things happen. Leaders can either be sitting there doing what they're doing, or they can go ahead and actually take action and lead others into a positive direction. So we're going to be utilizing the Student Leadership Challenge as well as the Social Change Model of Leadership, because the Social Change Model of Leadership actually helps folks and groups of folks achieve some sort of large-scale change. As I said, so I believe that leadership is about you and me and how we can actually achieve the larger sense of things. And the author here, Barry Posner, says that leadership is a process. Anyone can be a leader. And so this thought process that he says in his book, as well as all of the other materials that he has, says that no matter who you are a leader. You could be a leader in the lowliest of positions, or you could not be a leader and have the top executive position in a company. It's all about the motions that you go through and the actions that you take while you're a leader that actually makes you into the leader. Continue to forget about it. So I believe in this idea of servant leadership, and this idea that as leaders, you have a responsibility to work with others in benefit of the larger, greater good that we have here. So this Student Leadership Challenge is about how you mobilize others to get extraordinary things done in organizations, how you get extraordinary things done in your classrooms, how you get extraordinary things done in your day-to-day life. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Student Leadership Challenge, but first we're going to watch a video by Barry Posner at the University of Nevada, Reno, and his idea of what is the foundation of leadership in general. So we're going to take a look here at what he was saying, what I'd like for everyone to start doing is to start filling out the inventory that we just completed. And I want you, while you're filling it out, to reflect on the 4 foundations of a credible leader, right? Honesty, competent, enthusiastic, and/or forward thinking, right? And so think about these things. What you're going to do is fill out, there's about, I believe it's 30 questions. You're going to fill out on the last page of that assessment. You will transfer your scores and total them up. So you'll probably either need to do some quick brain math. I know it's late in the afternoon after some good lunch. We're a little, brain dead a little bit. But you're either going to use your math and/or your phones. And then you're going to transfer the scores, and I'll help you transfer the scores here in a second. So you're going to transfer your scores onto this chart. So we're going to take about 5 minutes to complete this. You may not complete it all the way, but I'll at least walk you through this. Just want to make sure we can keep on time here. So as you're taking this, I'll just give you a little background information about why I'm really passionate about the Student Leadership Challenge. And hopefully this doesn't interrupt your taking of the assessment. When I was a freshman about 15 years ago at the University of Oregon, the university president had a class that he was only for freshmen. 20 freshmen at the University of Oregon were selected to take this class on, it was called the Theories of Leadership. And in this class, I was one of the few 20 students that was selected, and I've loved leadership since I was little. I went to leadership camp. It's a little nerdy, but I love leadership that much, and so I went to leadership camp. But anyway, so we went to this class, and one of the books that we utilized in our course 15 years ago was the Leadership Challenge. And Barry Posner came and spoke to our class and talked to us about the credibility of leadership, as well as these 5 exemplary practices that we're going to be working on here today. And so this is why I'm really passionate about this. I use this in all of the courses that I teach. Here at Washington State University Pullman, I teach intercultural Greek leadership every semester, and in the spring I teach social justice leadership that focuses on developing your capacity as a social justice leader, developing an activist agenda, whether it's here on campuses or in the community, in the state, or nationally. So that's a little bit of information why I really love this very simple model that really helps folks understand how to improve their leadership capacity. So as you're going through, you're going to total up all of your scores. And once you've totaled up all your scores, you're going to enter them onto the chart. And so questions 1, 6, 11, 16, 21, 26 is going to be, you're going to mark an X in that first column called Model the Way. So you're going to total up. It's going to be from anywhere from 6 points all the way up to 30. And so you're going to put an X right there in the middle, wherever your number is. Does that make sense? So if you were 24 in those 6 categories, you will put it in that first one in Model the Way category. So put a large X right there. Same thing for the next one, next one, next one. Give you all about 3 more minutes to finish this up, and we'll talk about what this chart means and why it's important and what are moving in depth into the 5 exemplary practices of leadership. Seeing a lot of transferring of scores here. Make sure you total them up. Just total it all the way down the line. So just total these together. Yep. Total them by column. So it should be anywhere from 6 to 30 for that column. 1, 6, 11, 16, 21, 26. And do that for all 5 areas. All right. And it's really important to start this, to start off our conversation about the 5 exemplary practices of leadership through this self-assessment and understanding where do you actually think you line up. One of the funnest things that I like to do is to take this assessment, or I tell my students to take this assessment And they either have a very low opinion of themselves or a very high opinion of themselves. And then I asked them as an extra credit assignment is to give this to 3 other people and have them base it off their scores based off of you as a leader. And whether or not they actually think that you have the same leadership qualities that you believe you do. Because sometimes we have a very different idea of who we are and how other people perceive us, right? It's that idea of credibility. Some folks find us to be very credible while others don't. So as you move through, I think most of you have finished the assessment and have transferred your scores. So the first category that we have here is model the way. So you will place your X on anywhere in there. And that percentile, this is the percentile that you compare across the globe on how many people have taken this. We've said millions of people have taken this. So this is how you compare in this specific category or leadership quality of modeling the way. And we'll talk a little bit more about modeling the way. But that's how you compare globally to people who have taken this survey. So for example, if you had a 24 for model the way, you would be in the 65th percentile globally for those in this category. So as you move across here, you're going to have 5 different X's that tell you your percentages, your percentiles across the globe. Everyone have that so far? Anything surprising to folks as they've begun filling this out and they're like, what? I have a very, I didn't realize that I was really good at this or things of that nature. Looks like most of us are still transferring scores over. Well, as we're doing that, we're going to talk about the 5 different practices of exemplary leadership, and we'll come back. So the 5 that are on there, you can see them right there. They are model the way, inspire a shared vision, very similar to what Barry Posner was talking about in that TED Talk about the foundation of leadership is credibility. People follow those that have a vision, and so we're going to talk about that. The next one is challenge the process. You have to be willing to think outside of the status quo, and we're going to talk about what that means and how you can do that. The next one is enable others to act. Right? As leaders, we tend to take on all of the responsibility for whatever it is, whatever the tasks are at hand. We don't actually trust other people to get the job done the way we want to. The final one is encourage the heart. So we're going to talk about these 5 exemplary practices of leadership and what they are. Inside of the handouts that we gave you is model the way. And part of model the way is to clarify your values as an individual. Inside of these 5 exemplary practices of leadership, there's 2 kind of principles that are part of each one. So the first principle of model the way. And model the way is being that model leader, right? Making sure that everyone knows your values, that you set the example, that you are doing things the way in which you think they should be done, right? So others follow you. It's this idea of credibility. People have to think you're honest and competent. Modeling the way means that you've actually are honest with folks and that you know what you're doing, right? People aren't going to follow you if you don't know what you're doing. So what I'd like for you to do now is to get out the value sheet and take a look. I want you to circle your top 5 values. I'm very big on values. When you're in sororities and fraternities, that's one of the things that we talk about immediately is clarifying your values, understanding what do you believe in? Because if you don't believe in something, then how can you join these organizations? If you don't believe in this, if you don't want to practice this on a daily basis, why are you doing what you're doing? So you're going to circle your top 5 values, and then you're going to star your number 1. And then you're going to get into small groups, and in those small groups, you're going to share those values, and then we're going to come out and share a couple of them as a large group. And I think maybe we get tickets. I don't know. Did we not get tickets this year? The raffles? Oh, yeah, we have raffles. Perfect. So maybe we'll share some of those raffle tickets here. But go ahead and circle your top 5 values, star your number 1 of those 5, share in small groups. Take about 1 more minute. Hopefully you have shared the values with each other. All right, so we're going to take some volunteers here. Who would like to share their number 1 and give their reason why they chose that? Yes, right here. So risk-taking. Perfect. Thank you for saying that. Yep. So you said purpose, because if you don't know your purpose, what's the point of you doing it, right? What else do we have? Yes, sir, right here. Perfect. I really love that with that passion, right? You have to be passionate. That's actually one of the things that Barry Posner said that you have to have as a credibility as a leader, is you have to be passionate about something. You have to be totally interested in it. These are my top 5 values: equity, justice, empowerment, collaboration, and purpose. Equity is something that on a daily basis I am committed to. So every single day I am fighting for equity and to dismantle the systematic structures that are put in place to limit and inhibit minoritized populations. And so that's what I do on a daily basis. That's what I live. If you are not living these values, it's going to be very hard for others to follow you. Part of this idea of model the way is people follow your values. If you are not exhibiting values that they want to follow, they're going to be like, I'm going to go to someone else. The second component, or commandment, so to speak, of modeling the way is setting the example. As a leader, it is incumbent upon you to always be the first one there, right? If you believe in punctuality and you believe that your followers need to be punctual, and you need to be the one there. So you have to set the example for those that you will follow you. You can't say and stress, for example, if you're in an organization, that you enjoy academics and you're not actually focusing on your own academics. Does that make sense? So making sure that you're setting the example. The second one that we have here is inspire a shared vision. So let's talk about that. People respond to futuristic ideals, right? They respond to something that they can believe in. Part of what Barry Posner said was that folks and credible leaders have a vision. They inspire other people around this vision. And so that's the hope is what you can do. So let's think of some folks of who inspired them. So these are some of my inspirations. Martin Luther King Jr., President Obama, and Dolores Huerta. I worked for President Obama in 2007 and 2008 for his campaign because of that vision that he had, right? He inspired a whole bunch of people my age and a little bit younger, and a whole bunch of other folks to go out there, knock on the doors, get him elected. Because of this idea of, the power of change in the community. No matter who you believe in, part of this ideal of being a credible leader is having this vision for the future. So what I want you to do, once again, in small groups, is talk about who inspires you and why they inspire you. Take about another 30 seconds to wrap up these conversations. All right, so if we could get a couple of volunteers on who they believe inspires them. Who inspires you all, and why? Elon Musk. Why does Elon Musk inspire you? He's innovative, right? Elon Musk is innovative. He is the founder of Tesla, right? PayPal? I don't think. Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that it was PayPal. But I just know he does Tesla. So who else? Who else inspires you? So only Elon Musk's the only one that's inspired in this room. That's it. That's the only thing. Everyone is inspired by Elon Musk. That's it? Most of you didn't even know who that was, or did you? Exactly. Who do we have right here? Did you have your hand raised? I'm going to call on you anyway. Great. Alexander Hamilton, right? Came from nothing. Made himself into the Treasury Secretary, and then ultimately, I believe, didn't he become, I don't really fully know his story, but founding father of the United States, right? Who else do you have? Sometimes they don't have to be large-scale leaders. Are some of you inspired by your parents? How many of you were inspired by your parents or listed your parents as like someone who really inspires you? How about a friend or someone in your immediate circle? Okay? Or is it always just famous people? No. How many of you had someone famous or did not have someone famous as someone who inspires you? Pretty good group across the board. So we're about evenly split. Part of modeling the way is sharing this vision, and the people that we are inspired by have this vision, whether it's for us or the future. They also enlist others in their cause. And so one of the great things about being a leader is that you enlist others to help you on this vision. So if you have not already created your own mission statement or vision statement, that is something that I'm recommending, especially when you're working in student organizations and things of that nature, because that's how you get other people to follow what you're trying to sell. The third exemplary practice of leadership is challenge the process. And this idea of challenge the process is that you're not comfortable with the status quo, right? So we're going to watch a brief video. Some of you have already seen this today. Who knows where this comes from? Yep. It's an Apple commercial from the 1990s, from the early 1990s, before they developed the iPhone and iPad and anything that looks good. They were actually trying to brand themselves as being innovative. And one of the great things that leaders do when they challenge the process is that they search for new opportunities. Apple was not being content in being the number two personal computing seller, so the seller of personal computers. They, in the late 1990s and early 2000s, began to reinvent themselves and really search for new opportunities. They also experimented and took risks. So someone earlier mentioned risk-taking. That's actually really important as a leader, is that you take risks. Because one, it's important to progress as a society to take risks, but it's also done in a relatively safe environment, and it encourages learning through failure. The fourth practice of exemplary leadership is enabling others to ask. And here are 6 ways that you can enable others to act. But what the authors say as it relates to this is that you as a leader, ultimately your goal as a leader is to enable all of your followers to become new leaders. And it's all about encouraging them and enabling them to act. And the biggest paradoxy of leadership in general is that you as a leader, you have to give up all of your power away to your followers. And that's when you know you are you are one of the exemplary leaders that we have. You become more powerful when you give all that leadership away. But the 6 things that you can do to enable others to act, is to delegate. How many of us like to delegate to other people? Just a couple of us. We don't trust other people. I don't trust other people to get the stuff done. I know this is exactly how I like it and want it to be done. You ask questions, you listen, you take advice, you collaborate, and you strengthen others. The 5th one is encourage the heart. This is one of the hardest things as leaders that we do. We need to make sure that people feel connected to our organizations through praise and awards. We often forget to say, thank you for helping out. Thank you for doing this job. And that's one of the biggest things. As a leader, you have to ensure that everyone knows that they are a contributing partner of your community. You also need to recognize the contributions of folks, so whether they're small, large contributions, and celebrate the own values of the organizations and all of the victories that happen. So celebration, once again, as a leader is key. It can't just be telling folks, do this, do this, do this. So here are, once again, the 10 commandments. So find your voice, setting your values, set an example, envision the future, and enlist others. You search for opportunities. So searching for opportunities is that challenging the process. Experiment and take risks. You foster collaboration. Good leaders, credible leaders, foster collaboration amongst different folks. You strengthen others. You strengthen each other by giving them and empowering them to take ownership over your organization. You recognize their contributions, big or small. And then finally, you celebrate the values and victories. Right now, I believe we're doing evaluations. I also believe that you can do them online. If I'm not mistaken, these evaluations online. So how do you do this? You do it through trial. You do it through experience. You become better leaders through experience, whether it's trial and error. You learn by example, so you observe others. And then finally, you go to workshops. One of the things that Barry Posner said as it related to credibility is we must constantly be learning how to become better leaders as we move through this. As we go through this workshop, And the hope is that as a better leader, you become self-aware, you manage your emotions, you seek feedback from each other, you take the initiative, you seek help. These practices that we're giving you here is how you can strengthen your leadership capabilities and become a more credible leader. You set goals and make a plan. That's one of the key things as a leader. It's all about this idea about the future, right? Setting goals is the future, right? Practice, measure your progress, reward yourself. That's going back to encouraging the heart, one of the 5 exemplary practices. And you have to be honest with yourself. Being honest is a key component of credibility. One of the worksheets that I gave you is this action plan and how you can improve. If you're low, let's say, in model the way, it's an action plan on how you can become better in one of those 5 areas. One of the things that we have given you all is a Dropbox. If you want to take a photo of this, you have access to so we at the Center for Fraternity and Sorority Life have the license to hand out a workbook as it relates to this. So you can go back and inside of there's a 60-page workbook on each one of these 5 exemplary practices. And these are 5 different videos that explain this more in depth. I didn't figure we'd want to sit here watching all of these videos as we have it. So if you go to that Dropbox bit.ly, you will be able to access all of these resources that you just got by attending this workshop. It's a pretty awesome thing that we have. But remember the 5 exemplary practices of leadership. Modeling the way. What's the next one? Inspire shared vision. What's the next one? Thank you, Lily. Challenge the process. Thank you. She was in one of my classes, so that's why she knows these. The next one is, so we had challenge the process. Then the next one is enable the heart. No, it's enable others to act. See? Yeah, and then it's encourage the heart. Those are the 5 exemplary practices of leadership. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to ask us at the end. If we have some announcements right here, my friend.